All right, now let's talk about Suidlanders and really the ultimate prepper organization. And why wouldn't it be if you're going to prep? I mean, you're prepping for some real trouble over there. So, can you tell us how it was formed and just some details without giving away too much? I'm pretty sure there are people that are not sympathetic to it who are listening.
Yes, yes. John, the organization is based on two core premises. The first is the circumstances in South Africa at present. Clearly, there is a threat against white people, and we can speak at length about that. We can speak about the leaders that have called for the slaughter of all whites, and I can tell you a very interesting anecdote about that. But to stick to the point, the second premise is a series of prophecies given 100 years ago. Now, I know that not all of your listeners are necessarily Christian, and they might think prophecies, oh, that's a bit wacko. That's fine. It's what we believe. A man gave about 740 prophecies which have been immaculately fulfilled in the most uncanny series of prophecies that you could possibly imagine. And he said that our time in South Africa during World War I, let me put it this way, he said to his buddies, we are in the time of the first haystack now. This conflagration that is engulfing the world is the first haystack. A second haystack will come. Then a third haystack will come, a conflagration that engulfs the world. He said it will be ignited by Turkey in provocation of Russia. He said it will happen after a wave of black and brown-skinned migrants into Europe. He said, once you see a sudden wave of black and brown-skinned migrants into Europe, you will know that your time is nigh. He said that wave of black and brown-skinned migrants into Europe will be followed by the people of the North, and he's talking about white Western Europeans in the Northern Hemisphere, will rediscover their conservative voice. The conservatives, there will almost be a conservative backlash. And he said, once that happens, he said, then you will really know that you are standing before the time of the third great haystack. And there will be this tremendous conflagration around the world. He said, then our struggle in South Africa, our final struggle to the death will begin. So, on the basis of those prophecies, and there are many other road markers or route markers to them, which we can talk about if any of your people are interested, uncanny, very, very uncanny, and quite persuasive to us anyway. So between that and what's happening in South Africa at the moment, we believe that we would be foolish not to begin to prepare. So we're constituted as a civil defense organization under Protocols 1 and 2 additional to the Geneva Conventions, which make specific provision for identifiable groups to gather together to seek refuge and to seek the protection of international law in the event of an armed conflict to which they do not want to be a party. So in the event of a civil war in South Africa erupting, we would gather together and we would say that in terms of international law, we wish to be a non-party to this conflict. We do not wish to participate in this conflict. We seek the protection of international law. We declare ourselves to be unarmed, civilian, non-combatants. And we are preparing for that. We're preparing to protect our women and children and elderly in such a circumstance. And we are the largest, as you said, non-state a civil defense organization in the world. And by implication, given that we are preparing and we're not passive, we are also the largest prepper group in the entire world. And our preparations don't happen centrally, they happen on a family level, because that prevents the government or any other people who do not have our best interests at heart attacking any sort of headquarters or dispossessing us of preparations or what have you. And it is for those preparations that we are in the United States doing this fundraising tour, imploring people who are like-minded to us to assist us by donating funds to enable us to prepare.
Well, I really don't want to go into to how you do what you do, because, well, then you give people the opportunity to thwart your initiatives. But I take it it's made up of people who know what they're doing.
Well, I can tell you some stuff which is in the public domain. We are largely transparent because we know that we're a thorn in the side of the South African government. You can imagine for yourself, the Rainbow Nation, the African National Congress, Nelson Mandela, now to have a group of whites only in an organization such as ours is a source of huge resentment and bitterness on their part. So to mollify them, we endeavor to be as transparent as reasonably possible. And so I will tell you some things which may be surprising to your listeners. They might feel that I'm breaking confidence, but we know what we're doing, and we know very well what lines we shouldn't cross. We at present are what we call the now. We are in the now, what we call the now. And at this time, in a non-conflict situation, the now means that we have an organization that is structured much like the Boy Scouts. We have little groups all over South Africa. We have approximately 10 families per group, and 10 groups makes up what we call a region, and 10 regions makes up what we call a province. Although that's not strictly true, we tend to have 2 or 3 regions. I beg your pardon, we tend to have 20 to 30 regions per province. So 10 families, 10 groups, that makes a region, and then we have up to 20 to 30 regions per province, in some cases significantly less. And those people prepare by themselves as families fuel, food, water, so on, transport, specifically diesel, lots of diesel when we talk about fuel. That's the most important item that we prepare. And we have a series of training sessions that people can do, many online training sessions. And that is the current how things are organized now. We have 27 of these provinces around South Africa. In the event of an armed conflict erupting, which conforms to the criteria stipulated by the protocols additional to the Geneva Conventions. In other words, we can't just say now, oh, we think things are not very good in South Africa, we're going to implement this national emergency plan under the provisions of the protocols. No, it has to happen according to certain criteria. The conflict has to be of a certain intensity, and so on and so forth. Should that event materialize, which we are convinced that it will do and is beginning to do, we will then be legally entitled to declare ourselves under the protocols additional to the Geneva Conventions, and our people will evacuate the towns and cities of South Africa and go to various safe havens. In that event, our organization will be based on 6 departments. We have a department called Communications, which has a grid of high-frequency radio networks that cover South Africa. We have a department called Refugee Control, and that department's sole responsibility is to liaise with groups of convoys or with convoys, with groups of refugees fleeing towns and cities, and ensuring that they get onto the safest routes possible towards the safe havens. The next department within our organization in this circumstance, which we call the then, is receiving. Any group that enters a safe haven will then be received by the receiving department, and able-bodied men will be separated from the rest. Women and children will be separated. They'll be given food and clothing and shelter and trauma counseling if necessary. The next department is security, which in fact I am traveling. My companion in the United States on this fundraising tour is a man called Andre Kutsia. He is the head of our security department. That entails policing and ensuring that what happens in the in the refugee camps, in these safe havens, is all law-abiding and civilized, and that the society is well structured and kept under proper control. Obviously, at times like that, you can imagine that people who are highly traumatized by the deaths of loved ones are likely not always to be able to be rational, and control is a very important thing to prevent people doing irresponsible things and breaking the law. And the final department is logistics, which is the largest department by far, and that entails the administration of these safe havens. If the safe havens are in a town, for example, an existing town, then that department would ensure that that sewage, as far as possible, is taken care of, and that there is a sewerage system, that there's clean drinking water, and that food is gathered in and distributed, stored and distributed, and that the planting of crops takes place, that people have shelter and warmth, and that water is purified, and so on and so forth ad infinitum.
Wow, amazing. So there's no leaving. What happens if you want to just avoid it altogether? What's it like trying to get out? What's it like for a white person to get out of South Africa?
I'll just have a sip of water if you don't mind.
Not a bit.
John, I'll answer your question, but I'd like to begin by saying that we're the wrong people to ask that question, because we happen to be those people who believe that it is right and good to make a sacrifice, and that it is right and good to stand for the civilization, the beautiful, beautiful country that our forefathers built. For those of your listeners who don't know South Africa, it is widely regarded as one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful country in the whole world. I met an American travel writer who is in his 29th year of travel writing, 4 weeks ago in the USA, and he said that he traveled the world. He'd been to every country except 3 in the world in his career, and he said head and shoulders, how did he put it? Head, shoulders, thorax, and abdomen. South Africa is the most beautiful country that I've ever seen in the world. Our forefathers built something wonderful, and we are going to stand and fight and die for it if that's what it takes. It's not a vainglorious thing to say. I'm not a very brave person, and perhaps that's why I'm in the position that I'm in. I am not a physically courageous person. If I was, I would have continued to play rugby into my 30s, but I gave up when I was 21. But we believe that it is right to stand and fight and die if necessary for what is good, and we have no intentions of leaving. However, to answer your question in a direct way, it's difficult to leave South Africa. Since our currency has gone past 13, 14 to the US dollar, it's made it extremely difficult for any white South African who might be a millionaire in South Africa to come to the USA, for example, and be able to set up even a low to middle class working life. It's just far, far, far too expensive. And of course, we can't get refugee status in spite of the astonishing statistics of the number of white people that have been killed. I'll tell you that Dr. Gregory Stanton of Genocide Watch in Washington, D.C., has placed South Africa on the cusp, white South Africans, on the cusp of an all-out genocide. He visited South Africa in 2012, and when he departed, he said, the most distressing thing for me is not the likelihood of the genocide. The most distressing thing for me is that it appears that it is orchestrated. He was implying that the government is behind what he perceives to be a deliberate arrangement or setting up or preparation for an orchestration of an all-out genocide. So in spite of those phenomenal facts, we can't get refugee status. And unless we're very wealthy, it's more or less impossible to leave South Africa.
Wow, unbelievable. So so you're going to make your stand there.
We're going to make our stand here. We don't believe that many of, well, not here. I'm in Oakland. I beg your pardon, in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, at the moment, in a Motel 6 in Oklahoma City. We are going to make our stand in South Africa. Yes, we are going to make our stand. Somebody has to do it, John. Somebody has to do what's good. Somebody has to do what's right. At present in South Africa, we're going down the tubes. Women are being murdered and raped. Little girls are being raped. Can you imagine 4-year-old girls, people invading a farm, 6, 10 grown men cutting the eyelids out of the farmer and holding his face so that he can't avert his eyes from his wife being raped in front of him by 4 men. And then the child being raped, the daughter, crucified to a kitchen table, being raped by 3 or 4 men. 3 years old, John. 3 years old. In the name of God, I ask you. Not once, not 10 times, not a dozen times, not 100 times. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of stories like this. They are unknown in the world. If this was happening anywhere else in the world, it would be headline news. But because it's happening in the damn new South Africa, this archetype of harmony that the Western media has shoved down our throats for 30 years, because it's happening in South Africa and because it's happening to white people, nobody's saying a word. Can you imagine a 3-year-old girl being raped by 4 men and then set on fire while she's still alive?
No, I can't.
It's beyond anything, John.
Yeah, it's beyond any damn thing I've ever heard. It really is.